Hello everybody, at this station we're going to take a look at that process called solving by completing the square. So for this process, anytime it says we need to complete the square, we need to think about that process of filling in that blank. Now there's a sequence of steps we go through, so pay close attention into and how we get to this final answer, okay? Because it's different than the other processes that we've learned. So let's take a look at this problem. We have x squared minus 2x plus 25 equals 0. The first thing you want to do whenever you're going to complete the square is make sure that this coefficient here in front of the x squared is a 1. That means if this had been like a 2 or something, I would have needed to divide by 2 first. If this was a 3, I'd need to divide by 3, or so on. So because I had a lead coefficient here of 1, I can go ahead and start that process of completing the square right away. So remember that step, divide first if you need to. So we have x squared minus 2x plus 25 equals 0. Completing the square means we're going to need to fill in that blank. Remember that visual that we watched on that little video of me moving all those squares around and all those rectangular pieces and pulling in those little tiles? That was the visual you need to get in your head. So right now, if I were to start this process, I need to make room for the blank. So the first thing I would do, since I don't have to divide here, is to subtract that 25 over. So I'd have x squared minus 2x plus blank equals negative 25. Now to fill in the blank, we need to take half of this b term, which is in our case negative 2. So half of negative 2 is negative 1, and we need to square that. So we take negative 1 squared, and that's the value that I use to fill in this blank. Negative 1 times itself is a positive 1. Now remember, whatever I add on the left-hand side, I must also add to the right-hand side. So right now, I have x squared minus 2x plus 1 equals the other side now of negative 25 plus 1 is negative 24. So once I've completed the square, what I've done is made this left side into something that's factorable. So what multiplies to make 1? Remember our AC method, 1, and adds to make negative 2. What multiplies to make 1 and adds to make negative 2? Well, that would be negative 1 and negative 1. So we can put them in the 4 boxes. Remember, we talked about this, but we can also use that pattern we've learned to say that this would be negative 1 and x minus 1 again. So 2 of them, essentially. And I still have negative 24 on the other side. So rather than write it twice, remember this is the factored form of the problem above, rather than write it twice, we say, hey, I could have just written it one time because the something times itself, it was squared essentially. So I have negative 24 still on the other side. And now to help eliminate and get the x alone here, we need to go ahead and take the square root of both sides. So I'd have x minus 1, with or without the parentheses here, equals, and now I need to simplify that square root a little bit. So I break that 24 apart. I recognize that there's going to be an I, right, because it's a negative 24. And I'd use 4 times 6 to break apart the 24. Because 4 is a perfect square, I'd have 2 square roots of 6. So I'd have x minus 1 equals 2i square root of 6. The plus or minus would be in front of the 2i square roots of 6. And last but not least, I'd add that 1 over, and it would become 1 plus or minus 2i square roots of 6. Okay, so the process of completing the square, if we were to summarize, first you need to divide if you have any numbers in front of those x squares, okay, any coefficients in front of that lead term. Then we need to fill in the blank, make room for the blank, so get that blank going, and then we're going to fill it in. And then we need to factor, and then we need to square root, and then we should be able to move a number over, so isolate the x. So these are the sequence of steps that we go through each and every time we complete the square. Okay, thanks again, guys. See you later, Sabers. Kincaid out.